Thank you, doctor. He is an expert on the connection between physical and mental well-being. Dr. Podl is going to share insights with you on sustainable performance and holistic health. He's guided a lot of patients from probably not totally healthy, extremely stress-filled lives toward healthier, more fulfilling lives through some of the strategies that they're going to talk about today. So they're going to share some advice, some personal anecdotes. You're going to hear a few things that probably surprise you, and you're going to have time for some Q&A as well. So Niki and Dr. Todd, please come up to the stage.
Excited about this turnout. Can you guys hear me? Is that okay? No? How am I? Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Niki Schaefer, and I am the General Counsel of ReliabilityFirst. But before I get into who I am and what I'm doing here and introducing Dr. Podl, I want to give a big shout out to Michelle Cross, who's right over there. She has poured her heart and her soul into this event, every aspect of it, and she did it on top of her incredibly demanding job, her life outside of work, which includes parenting two young boys. I've had a front row seat to the competence, the thoughtfulness, and the dedication that she has applied to this event, and I am so excited that we all get to experience the fruits of her labor. I'm also excited to be here today with my doctor, Dr. Todd Podl, who is currently a family medicine specialist at University Hospitals. For those of you who aren't from Cleveland, UH is just one of the large hospital systems here, like the Cleveland Clinic, which might be a more familiar name. I met Dr. Podl at my previous job at Eaton Corporation, where we were lucky enough to have our own company doctor, like in-house in the building, which was pretty awesome. So he worked there before he left to go to UH. When I left Eaton after 5 years of being there to become the general counsel of RF, I remember telling him that the thing I was most sad about was that he couldn't be my doctor anymore. And then he left Eaton shortly thereafter. I like to think it was because of sadness that I wasn't his patient anymore. But I'm pretty sure I was the first person to sign up to be his patient, and then my entire family as well. But my loyalty to Dr. Podl, like my loyalty to so many people in this room in a work-related sense, is truly rooted in gratitude for helping me be better than I otherwise would have been on my own. Dr. Podl was my doctor when I suffered a stroke at 38 years old while I was working at Eaton. It turned my life upside down for a period of time, and Dr. Podl really helped me turn it right side up. I'm not sure if he remembers this, but I remember it vividly. He came to visit me while I was in the hospital, in the stroke unit at Hillcrest Hospital. Being there was a very humbling experience, to say the least. When I landed there, I had no feeling on the left side of my body, and I had tremendous difficulty getting words out of my mouth. And no one could tell me when my speech or my feeling would come back. My kids were 10 and 8. I was eagerly climbing the corporate ladder at Eaton. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a big talker, and I'm always on the go. And at 38 years old, I was looking at the distinct possibility of not being the Niki that I knew anymore. I had previously thought of myself as so brave. And I will tell you, I have never been so scared in my entire life. I can still almost cry about it today, 7 years later. But the doctors told me that the sooner any of the things that I had lost started to come back, the more likely I was to make a full recovery. And it took about 48 hours But at the 48-hour mark, we started to see some very subtle signs that my speech and my feeling were returning. And as soon as that happened, my joy and the joy of my family, particularly my mother, who I think a lot of you met last night, it was overwhelming. We were so loud and so boisterous just at the thought that I could get better. I don't think the stroke unit had ever seen anything like it. And I remember Dr. Podl walking into my room and telling us that he knew exactly where to go because he heard so much noise, and he knew that only I could turn my post-stroke hospital stay into a party. The few months following my stroke involved some really hard work to rewire my brain to speak clearly and with ease, and to re-engage and re-strengthen the left side of my body. But in the grand scheme of strokes, my deficits were minor and my physical recovery was easy. I really don't have words for how lucky I was there. The mental part of dealing with my stroke, so understanding why it happened, preventing myself from having another one, because you're more likely to have another stroke once you have a stroke, working through the fear and the anger and the sadness that sets in when something terrible happens that you blame in part on yourself. That has been much more of a journey for me. And that journey is part of why I put myself on the agenda today, because there's really no explanation for why I get to sit here comfortably on this stage and speak clearly to all of you. It's truly pure luck. And I made a promise to myself when all this happened that I would not let my luck go to waste. So for the last almost 7 years, I have forced myself to stand or sit in front of audiences and talk about mistakes I made and lessons I learned, in part to prevent someone else from having a stroke, or to act fast when they spot the signs of a stroke, but mostly to inspire people to place more value on their own mental and physical well-being than I think we're inclined to place, especially as working women. Because not only will that prevent a stroke, it will actually just help you be happier, which I think at the end of the day is all we really want. So that's what Dr. Podl and I are really hoping to accomplish today. I joked with Michelle Cross when we were discussing this panel that I wanted to call it TMI, because I plan to talk about bad decisions I've made and somewhat embarrassing physical and emotional issues I've navigated and what I've learned from them, in hopes that something will resonate with you and maybe inspire you to share more with this group today, or even better, make some changes in your own approach to your mental and physical well-being. Dr. Podl is going to talk to you about the medical science behind all of it. And we're talking about this at a women's conference today because that's today's event. But this really applies to men and women. So I'm really encouraged to see a bunch of men in this audience. It applies to parents and to people without children, to young people and to old people. And I am not talking about work-life balance. I don't think that there's even such a thing. I have never been balanced. I never will be balanced. This is about focusing on what matters most to you and making sure that your mental and physical well-being is at the top of your list, no matter who you are. And I realized I was supposed to take my slide thing, so I'm going to go get that before I get to my next slide here. Okay. I want to start by giving you a little background about me and how I was living before my stroke. But before I do that, I do need to make sure that I say this. Suffering a stroke at 38 is a very, very rare thing. And like most people who have them that young, mine was caused by a perfect confluence of bad things that are very unlikely to happen at the same time to anyone. They just weirdly happened to me. But to use an energy analogy, it's like those stacks of the holes in with the Swiss cheese with the lined up holes that is often used to describe the 2003 blackout. A lot of things just went wrong in my body at the same time. I'm going to try and paint a picture for you of me back then, but I have a suspicion that many of you in this room are currently living like I was. So I do not want the takeaway for any of you to be that you are about to have a stroke, because I do not think that that is going to happen. And Dr. Podl will explain to you why that is very unlikely to happen to you. So this is a slide just for people who don't know me. That picture was taken before I had my stroke. So you can see that then and now, I really don't have the visual markers of someone you'd think that this would happen to. That was the age my kids were when I had my stroke. They are now high schoolers who often make me feel like I'm going to have another stroke. Just kidding, sort of. Not even really. Teenagers are hard. I know I look very happy in that picture, and that's in part because Kaylin took it. And she's really great at her job, and she is who is doing our headshots today, and she's just a pro. But let me assure you, I was really struggling back then. My whole life, I have tried to be the best and the most at everything I did. My mom, she might have told this story last night. She likes to tell the story of me teaching myself how to jump rope and how I was determined to be an expert that very same day. So determined that I bruised the bottom of my feet so badly that I couldn't walk the next day. But that's just sort of my personality and how I approached everything I did. As I got older and I had a family and a career and community involvement, there were just more things that I wanted to be my definition of the best at. The idea of saying no to something or not going full throttle on something seemed weak to me. So I just kept saying yes, even when saying yes made absolutely no sense. I never even took the time to think about whether whatever I was saying yes to was a good use of my time. I have so many great examples of this really unhealthy behavior. I'm sure a lot of you do too. The year I had my stroke was my 4th year at Eaton Corporation, and I was climbing the ladder in hopes that I would someday be a candidate for the general counsel job there. There were 199 other people in the legal department, so I'm not even sure that that was realistic. But in my head, it totally was. And I figured if I could just show Eaton leadership that I was willing to do anything and everything, it would just accelerate my success. At the time, there were also some significant cost-cutting measures instituted. So the lawyers were asked to accomplish more with less support. And that is the tale as old as time in corporate America. And it's not just for lawyers, it's for everyone. So when I was already overworked, Eaton's US lawyers were asked to take over our labor and employment issues in Mexico that had previously been run by someone who was based in Mexico. And I was the first to raise my hand to do it. And I did it immediately without thinking. I just volunteered because we were asked to do something. I don't speak Spanish, and I'm not an employment lawyer, okay? And I had no time to do that work anyway. Like I had enough on my plate. Why on earth would I volunteer to do that? But I did. And I did stuff like that all the time. And since there are only 24 hours in a day, something had to get sacrificed to get all of that done. And for me, My calculus was basically that was anything personal to me. So it was my sleep, it was my exercise, it was addressing my own health issues, like my eye hemorrhaging from high blood pressure a few months before my stroke. And yes, that really happened. And yes, I did nothing about it because I thought I didn't have time. And Dr. Podl was in my building. Okay. This is like how ridiculous my thought process was back then. All right, let's go to the next slide here. Okay. So other than when my eye hemorrhaged, I really thought I looked and felt fine. I did not look fine when my eye hemorrhaged, by the way. That was very unattractive. But I really thought I looked and felt fine, and I figured that none of that mattered until it did. And on a relatively normal workday in March of 2019, I felt this horrible headache. And the next thing I knew, I couldn't walk or talk. And the insane thing is, I didn't go to the hospital. I drove a car with my right hand. I leaned on someone to get to my car, and I drove a car with my right hand. I went home. I convinced myself I had vertigo. I crawled up my stairs and into my bed, and I spoke gibberish to my husband. I could get words out, but it took a really long time to go from my head to get out of my mouth, and they sounded very confusing. So I spoke gibberish to my husband to tell him I didn't feel well. And I lied in bed and I typed notes with one hand to prepare for a meeting with Eaton CFO the following morning. Not surprisingly, that meeting with the CFO didn't happen, in large part because I couldn't really talk. But I did not go to a doctor until my parents forced me to the next day. And a lot of things happened, but I finally landed in the emergency room about a day after my stroke. And at first, there was some debate about whether I was exhibiting symptoms of MS or a stroke, but an MRI quickly confirmed that it was a stroke in two places, which weirdly in the moment felt like a relief when my other option was MS, because at least I felt like I could get better. There was initially a lot of focus on illegal drug use being the cause. I'm not sure if that's because of what I look like or because I'm a lawyer, but it was really weird because other than having tried pot gummies in California for the first time because it was legal and my husband's 40th birthday, there's the TMI for you. I had actually never done any drugs. Like, I'm too much of a control freak. But I mention this because I think it's something that happens to women a lot when we have medical issues. Like, the issues themselves, they can be minimized, or they can be attributed to what are really unlikely causes, and they can lead to going down unnecessary rabbit holes and wasting a lot of time. And it's actually something that's been studied in female stroke victims who seek medical attention because time is often of the essence. I did not have the type of stroke where having that injection would have been helpful to me, but there are a lot of people, women especially, who do have that kind of stroke. So it is important to like get to the issue quickly. I will say that about a year after my stroke, it did become clear that prescription medication that I was on for my rosacea in my skin was a contributing cause. So there was a relationship to drugs, just not illegal ones like the initial people treating me suspected. Ironically, it was a medication that Dr. Podl never liked, and he had suggested going off of, but my vanity prevented me from listening to him. And lo and behold, prolonged exposure to that medication is known to cause vascular issues, and my stroke was vascular. It was another lesson I learned: listen to your doctor and read the fine print. But I think I am probably done talking about myself for a second, and I can hand it over to Dr. Podl to talk to you about the science behind my stroke and also stress in general. And you just tell me when you want me to change the slide.
Should I turn on two? Two? Can you hear me back there? If anybody else wants to stand, feel free. I usually try to get up and move around a little bit when I'm in my office, but I do have to say, first of all, Joanna, thank you. That was the kindest introduction I've ever had in my life. It was over the top. I mean, I've never been called an expert of anything. But it was, I would think about calling you up though as a wellness coach, because, and we'll come to what you did there. I thought it was great. The breast stuff was really cool. But Niki is very kind as well. And I just want to say, I can remember vividly in life, even as a physician, when there are moments that you just, you have a patient, you have a connection. And by the way, I've been blessed to, Niki came and saw me, and then it was okay that I could see her husband. And then it was okay that I could actually see her kids, which anytime as a family physician, you're allowed to see someone's children. It's the highest honor. But maybe even a higher honor yet is that she lets me see her grandmother. And it's a wonderful family. But I remember your dad had called me and we were talking. I remember exactly where I was standing in our house and like, oh no. And my first thought is, okay, I hope this is vertigo. And then as I'm talking more about the whole situation, like, no, please, you just have to go. And so the thing is, it's like, even as a physician, a lot of times you're just so surprised, like, how does this happen to somebody, this age, this vital? Because what Niki doesn't give herself some credit. She said, I was just lucky. And I'd say there's that line about you create your own luck. And I think she actually did create some of her own luck here, because even though she was going, she still really took care of like what I would consider like the 6 pillars that are in the lifestyle medicine world, which is a kind of a newer domain in healthcare where, a number of providers, not just physicians, but nurses, other forms of practitioners really are like, listen, we've got a lot of medications that are helpful, but what is at the core of someone's personal health and well-being? And the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine are what you might think they are, like physical activity is important, nutrition is important, sleep is important, substance use is important. Mostly tobacco and alcohol in our country are the biggest culprits. And then stress management is also important, but also connectedness is important. And I would say Niki was very connected with her family, always has been, talks about them passionately. They've got, again, a really nice unit. They do all sorts of things, great things together. She's connected with so many people here, smiling and engaging with people. I see it all the time. So she had that going for her. She definitely took some time to exercise. And again, I think she was pretty thoughtful about her nutrition. She wasn't a smoker at all. I'm not sure about her alcohol consumption on a Friday or Saturday night, but for the most part, she really was doing a lot of healthy things. But there are some of those critical things, and we'll get to them in a little bit later, about what stress does to your body. And that is not a very good thing. You want a little bit of stress to keep you going, but too much is always of anything is not a great thing. So on this slide, if you look at this, these aren't just boxes to check. And I would say some are probably higher priority than others. And, if you get 3 or 4 of them, doesn't mean, again, you're the next person in line. But these are a lot of things people can actually act on. So the things I would be most thoughtful of when we talked about the lifestyle stuff is, what's your diet like? What's your physical activity or inactivity? And when I came out of my graduate program after teaching high school for a while, was like, hey, exercise is going to save the world. I got a master's in exercise science. Like, this is it. And then as I'm kind of in practice and after getting my medical degree, it was like, oh, wait, no, I think nutrition is probably more important than exercise. Both are important, but I'd have to kind of put people more in the direction of making sure they're a little tighter with their nutrition. And then that was when I was working at the Cleveland Clinic. I worked there for 17 years. I actually somehow accumulated the largest family medicine practice at that time of like 2,700 people. And the idea was that to really be a good family physician, you should have 1,800 people. And I remember walking into my boss one day and saying, what do I do about these extra 900 people? Thought I can do without sleep. And not till later in life did I realize, that was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. And is to not be thoughtful of sleep, because nothing is good. And the hardest thing as a physician, I get people who have trouble with insomnia all the time. There are medications, there are supplements over there, but at the end of the day, they only do so much. And what you really have to learn to do is, again, what Joanna kind of hinted at earlier, and we'll talk about that later and what that is. And so before we get too far ahead with that, I am curious, when she did have us do that breathing exercise, I just love to see a general show of hands. Did anybody feel differently when they took those breaths? Okay, good. So a lot of you did, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I'm glad you did that. And I'm sure if others, when they were doing their breathing, if you really pay attention, you will notice something goes on in your body that's really for the better. So anyway, those things are foundationally important in terms of how you can kind of prevent not just a stroke, but almost any other health problem, be it heart disease, onset of diabetes, cancer, and not to be kicked to the curb. And it's not really up here too. Loneliness, because I mentioned about connectedness, one of the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. Loneliness increases, if somebody identifies as lonely, they have a 50% increased stroke risk over baseline, which is a small risk to begin with. But, increasing something 50% is not something to sneeze at. And so taking the time to being present, as Joanna said too, hey, be here, take the time. And I love my wife for many reasons, and that's what she's always trying to pull me into. I was always known as the dad who was just like not available, and it's kind of a sad reputation to have. But I think that's, my kids still love me and we do great things now, but I'm certainly more present than I ever was. So taking the time, it really is important. And you don't have to knock it out of the park, making any of these changes to improve your health and well-being, but start and keep plugging away, find what works for you. So let's go to the next slide. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So, and then we'll circle back to this a little bit later, but this is what I was alluding to earlier. And we actually talked about this when Niki had the courage to stand in front of people at Eton and tell her story there years ago. It was really moving, as this is kind of for me now too. It was really, it's a pretty amazing story. And I'll also say too that, again, if Niki hadn't done those things, it's about, if people have strokes, about 1/3 of people have a fatal stroke. And about 1/3 of people have a stroke that leaves them significantly impaired. And Niki's one of those other third that's, fortunate to be where she is. But again, I think she created some of that. But it's not very common that happens. I mean, symptoms were terrible from it took a while. I remember talking with her weeks, months later about how her recovery's going. Well, I went for a walk, but my leg isn't really doing it. I just feel off. I'm worried about falling. And, it took time, but she persisted. So another reason to kind of keep yourself in tune with things. But what goes on with stress are 2 hormones that we need that come from our adrenal glands that are vital, but too much of them is not good. And this is what happens in the stress response is these things get out of balance and cause these problems. And when we come to it later, I'm going to run through a little exercise with you, but I just wanted to kind of share, well, stress is foundationally there. And Niki also mentioned, I wanted to say this too about work-life balance. My wife is, if she was listening here, she'd like, oh, here we go. That concept strikes me as odd. Like being a former chemistry teacher, a balance is you have 2 pans and they've got to do the same thing. So if you give up something, you got to give up something else, like to kind of maintain that balance. And in kind of preparing for this, I came across this line that I thought was actually perfect that I could buy into. Work-life harmony, which I think sounds just what I would want it to be. I'm dealing with what I got and I'm making it flow and it works and it can be adaptable. It's likely going to change and it can change. I don't have to react with it. I can flow with it. So I'm not sure if that resonates with anybody here, but when I heard that, like, that's what I'm going to buy into. That yes, something can work together and be a little bit more symbiotic. So anyway, I'll come back to something here later. And then.
Okay. You want me to, I can take the next
Sure.
one. Okay. All right. So I put this slide in here just to point out what the signs of stroke are, and because what would an ERO presentation be without an acronym? So for strokes, it's actually really easy. It's B FAST. So the B is for balance. The E is for eyes and vision. The F is for face and droopiness or unevenness. The A is for arms and weakness or numbness in them. The S is for speech, and the T is for time to call 911. I had the B, the F, the A, and the S, but I had no idea in the moment. Dr. Podl knew before I did, but I kept trying to convince him via text that I had vertigo. So I think, I feel like we don't have to talk that much more about strokes or what happened with me, because I don't think any of that needs to mean that much to any of you, because like I said, I don't think any of you are going to have a stroke, even if you're doing worse than I was back then. What I was really hoping to focus on today were the things I learned after my stroke, because I honestly really regret that it took having a stroke to get me to learn them. This list is actually a lot longer, but these are the key ones, and we'll go through what I mean by each in more detail. The first, and Dr. Podl has already mentioned it, is how vital sleep is and how silly we are for not making it a priority. The second and third are related, the importance of choice, so actively choosing to do what's important to you and trading off the stuff that's not. The fourth is taking the time to ask yourself why you are doing and valuing what you are, and doing something, like actually doing something with the answers to those questions. The fifth is letting yourself draw and stick to boundaries and managing through the self-consciousness that is often associated with that. And the sixth is mindfulness and being present, which we've talked about a little bit today already. Lastly, I put a book on here, which has become a sort of work Bible for me. I actually made everyone that was part of the RF book club read it when I first started as general counsel of RF. But a lot of the ideas that I'm going to talk about today, I really learned about in essentialism. All right. So let's start with what I'm not sure I can emphasize enough, but we all need to be sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night as much as we possibly can. There are serious physical and mental consequences when we don't. I am proof. I was sleeping for about 4 hours a night for well over a year in advance of my stroke. It should be the last thing we sacrifice, but it's honestly often it's the first thing to go. And then I think you might want to say a few things about the science behind this.
Or at least very briefly, I turn this back on.
Yeah.
Hello? Ooh, wow. Pretty loud as it is. So interesting thing about sleep, and when we've talked about it, first of all, again, when we talk, oh, you got to sleep more. That seems to also kind of create its own anxiety. I've got to sleep more. So I'll sit there in bed sometimes and I wake up like, I've not slept enough and, toss and turn a little bit. So I get, it does happen to everybody. Everybody has a bad night here and there. But what was interesting to me when I was at Eton, learning a lot about lifestyle medicine principles and learning a lot about the value and importance of sleep, that's when I kind of had that, oh my gosh, I can't believe those 17 years of the clinic. What did that do to my body over time? Trying to get by on 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night, thinking I was fine. Well, first of all, very simple. If for some reason, if you only sleep 4 hours one night and you try to drive, which I would do with our family, hey, let's take a trip down and see the grandparents in Florida and, we'll get an early start. Well, it turns out if you sleep 4 hours, your driving performance is equivalent to blowing a .10. Which, isn't like slurring your speech, but it's enough to be impaired. So, you want to be thoughtful of again, the importance of that on a relative basis. But more importantly to me, when I was at Eton, I learned other things about how leaders were perceived by the people who worked for them or reported to them. Often, if people had reported less hours of sleep a night, they were seen as a leader who was not as kind of a thinking outside the box kind of person, not as thoughtful of creating a team type of environment. Basically, any leadership thing you're looking for in your leader, they're not doing very well with. And this is from just doing these random studies of, okay, how many hours does your leader sleep? And they'd find out from them. But so there really is an important thing is to be thoughtful of what that is. But again, not to have a panic attack yourself if you're not, oh my gosh, I only slept 6 hours last night. What's going on with me? But over time, if you haven't really figured it out, that's when you really want to probably try to reach out to, your doctor or other healthcare professional. What ways are there to work? There are myriad choices over the counter. Unfortunately, a lot of them are kind of a Band-Aid approach, haven't really been proven. And then again, not really sure where they're manufactured. Melatonin, for example, they found melatonin samples when they just pulled stuff off the shelf. I mean, it ranged anywhere from like 0.2% of what it said it had to 600 times what it said it had. So, which is frightening. So you just really have to be careful. Not that there aren't good sources out there, but in general, you have to be very thoughtful for things that aren't as regulated as much as, things that go through the FDA. So we'll talk more about that.
Okay. This slide captures a concept from essentialism that really resonated with me, and that's the importance of choice and how it's a muscle that we have to exercise or it can atrophy. And that's really what happened with me. I stopped choosing. I just defaulted to everything was important and urgent. And frankly, I was probably so tired. My decision making was completely flawed, as Dr. Podl just said. And the reality is, if you don't choose for you, other people will. And the choices that other people make for you are going to be in their best interest, not yours. And it's not on purpose to make things difficult for you, but that's just sort of how life works. The concept of choice is related to this slide. Accept and act like trade-offs are necessary. More is not always more and can, in fact, be less. Anyone who knows me, however, knows that much to the chagrin of my husband, there is a very, very key exception to this rule. When it comes to purses, jewelry, and shoes, more is always more. There should never be trade-offs on anything, and there is never enough. But aside from that, stop feeling like you have to say yes to and go big on everything. You don't. Brian theory. In fact, you will do the things you care about better if you don't do that. I told Brian that this whole thing was really directed at him today. So this slide captures a concept from essentialism. Oh, sorry. This one, sorry, I'm on my next one. Okay, so how do you figure out what you want to go big on? Ask yourself why you are investing the time the way you are. I was so busy doing and caring about everything with no filter that I never took the time to ask myself why I was doing it or why I cared about it. And when my stroke forced me to ask myself, there were some things I was spending a lot of time and energy on, and I honestly could not explain why, other than that someone asked me to. It sounds so simple, but if you don't have a really good reason for doing whatever it is that you're doing, why are you doing it? Once you can articulate what you want to focus on and why, which is an exercise in itself and time consuming, you've then got to create boundaries to allow you to do them. And you have to unapologetically tell people what those boundaries are, which is very hard. But frankly, if you're choosing the right things and you're doing a good job, no one is going to fault you for it, even if you think they are. I work very differently now than I did 7 years ago. But there are people who worked with me back then who work with me now. And I don't think a single person would say that my work product is compromised. I'm just doing things differently. What drawing and adhering to your boundaries creates space for is being present. Because I'm not as worried, I'm still slightly worried about having enough time to fit everything in. It's so much easier for me to just enjoy the moment by shifting my focus from what I have to do next to what I am actively choosing to do now. My relationships and my work have honestly become more fulfilling in the present moment. But making that shift takes a lot of work and a lot of thought. And Dr. Podl is going to talk a little more about that.
Yeah, so mindfulness practices, and also very helpful with sleep, by the way. I should have mentioned, for people who want to try something on their own, there are Sleepio, Headspace, even Calm. Actually, those have been studied a little bit, do cognitive behavioral therapy techniques to help people find ways to just settle themselves and get themselves to sleep. So those are great options. And first of all, I would say if you can stay away from a supplement or a medication, that's a great place to start. But sometimes, again, I understand people are traveling or you're out of time zones, and sometimes I get it, sleep aid can be a benefit on a short-term basis. But the interesting thing about mindfulness meditation practices, those have been around for millennia, and there's a reason they've been around for millennia, because they work. But what I learned was my first exposure to meditation was in medical school, and this friend said, hey, so-and-so's going to do some meditation stuff in the chapel at the hospital. Want to join? I'm like, So I went, sat there for 20 minutes, had no idea like what I was supposed to feel or expect. And they're like, how was it? Like, well, I don't know, I'll try it again. So I went a second time and same thing happened. So I never went back. And then I heard, when apps were becoming popular, so maybe 10, 12 years ago, this guy who started Headspace, he's a Brit, and he's like, oh my gosh, first of all, 10 extra IQ points for you. You sound so much smarter than I do. So I'm like, okay, hey, so I'll put that on my phone. I put it on my phone, tried it a couple times, didn't work. But I still believe that those practices could be helpful. And then I had a patient at Eton, wasn't Niki, who came in, hey, I'm having a lot of trouble with my sleep, struggling with my family and kind of finding this kind of harmony, if you will. We use the word balance, I think, but harmony in my life. And like, it's just very difficult. What can I do to help with my, get things settled, get to sleep? And so we talked about the foundational importance of sleep. And so I gave him this, actually, I'd always give people this like page-and-a-half handout of mindfulness meditation information, why it works, what's the data behind it, practicing it. And so I gave that to him, and I said, and I'll also give you a sleep aid. My expectation is going to be a pill in pocket kind of thing. You're not going to take this every night, but if you have to take it, you can, and it's okay. And sometimes that alone is settling for people. Hey, I've got a plan B here that makes a difference. So I still do that today because it can be helpful. But I said, come back and at the end of the month and let me know how things are kind of coming along. So he shows up, which usually people don't follow up. And I'm like, well, hey, how'd the medication go? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, didn't you take the medication? You seem like you're in a better space. He goes, no. He said, I read that stuff you gave me. And he goes, I started doing it. And after about a week, I started feeling better. I started sleeping better. And it was a head slap moment for me. I kid you not. Like, okay, you got to practice it like anything. It's a skill. So if you're going to invest some time, do it. So I told myself, okay, I'm putting that Headspace app back on my phone. I'm going to do it 10 minutes a day for 10 days. And if I don't get it, I don't get it. Maybe it's just not the right thing at the right time for me. And so I can remember vividly sitting in my backyard, what the weather was like, what was going on the fourth day. And it was like a light went off. And it wasn't like I was in some Zen state, but I finally realized the potential of what can happen. And it really was this idea of being present. It got me to slow down. It really just distracted me. And then over time, I found that 10 minutes was too long in a way because I would sometimes doze off. So I found for me, the sweet spot was about 3 to 5 minutes. Perfect. I get a little snippet of some wisdom on the app, and then there would be this moment of just breathing and getting settled. So, but then I found too that really probably the key player there wasn't so much about being present and focusing, it was actually the breath work part of it. And which is often part of meditation practices, but you can do breath work alone. You could sit in something like this, listening to some guy pontificate, like, okay, I've had enough of him. I'll just kind of settle my own brain. And by doing some breath work, because you could do it at any time and it works really well. And I would always thought, I love my parents dearly, but they never gave me the best advice about, if I was anxious or something. They'd say, hey, Todd, just relax. And so I'd kind of slump back in the chair and I'm not feeling it. What's supposed to happen? And if they had said, hey, why don't you do some breath work? Because what's really cool is this is first grade science, or maybe it's even kindergarten science. It is so fundamentally simple what goes on in your body when you take a breath, and it makes perfect sense. So to break it down, there are two main systems in your body, nervous system. You have your sympathetic system, you have your parasympathetic system. The fight or flight, the rest or digest. Okay, so two main symptoms, and your brain's kind of going back and forth, fluctuating, monitoring things and whatnot. So in a stress situation, could be, you're have a harmful threat or you're just worried about something. You shift to this, fight or flight type of system. What happens in that system is your eyes dilate bigger, so you can take in more light, you can see more sharply, you can see your periphery better. Even if you're not feeling a physical threat, that's what happens. It also sends a signal to your heart, beat faster and more regularly, which we won't go into heart rate variability, but that's an important thing. So being regular and fast is not good. And it tells your lungs to breathe faster and shallower. It sends signals to your gut. Hey, this is not the time to digest food. We need the blood elsewhere. It also sends signals to your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys. Those are important. They make your stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. So those things go up and keep the thing going. Well, it turns out your brain listens to what's going on. So here you are, you're sitting in that situation without in your cognitive state of like an awareness, like, is there really a threat here? Why am I feeling this way? So you can't control your eyes dilating and getting smaller. That would be a cool bar trick, but that doesn't happen. You can't tell your heart to beat faster or slower, and you can't divert your blood flow, but you can control your breath. And so what happens when you take those slow pauses and deeper breaths, your brain's like, whoa, okay, I can tone things down. And the silly thing to me is like, in my first year of medical school, I'm like, hey, it's hard enough adjusting. I'm going to take this easy exercise elective because I just spent 2 years in grad school all about exercise. It's going to be a piece of cake. And they did this one thing, and I don't really remember the point of it other than, hey, we put this pulse ox on your finger and watch what happens to your heart rate when you just kind of slow your breathing down. I'm like, okay, I saw that, but didn't really put it all together. And so that's where breath work really trumps everything. So actually my sleep aid, because if you practice this, it can help. It's like if I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna send Niki's prescription in, she's gonna be pissed. No, she's pissed. She doesn't tell me she does. Is just to sit there, okay, take some deep breaths. And everybody's probably heard of like box breathing and this and that. Come up with your own numbers. I came up with, my 3 numbers are, I take 3 seconds to inhale because I have 3 kids. I hold the breath for 5 seconds, there are 5 people in my family, and then I exhale for 11 just because I like the number. And I just repeat that, and I kid you not, for me, after some practice, I fall asleep within a minute or 2. And so there are these things. If you train your body and adapt to these things, it can really be a big game changer. So again, there are plenty of resources out there. Apps, if you will, are certainly easily accessible. But a big part of kind of health and well-being and mental health is kind of learning those practices, or at least getting some insight in them. And it might not be the right thing at the right time for you, but keep that in mind.
All right, we are wrapping up. So I just want to close with 2 slides here. One about how I live differently and better post-stroke, and the next about things that I think I'll always struggle with. As weird as it probably sounds, and as scary as it was in the moment, I am so glad that I had my stroke. I'm so glad I have the luxury to even say that, but I appreciate my life in a way that I never would have without it. But I so deeply regret that it took a stroke to make me feel that way, because it shouldn't have. And although I was scared into being better about prioritizing my mental and physical well-being, I still struggle in all of the areas that I listed here, probably on a daily basis. We can't help it. I think as women, as men too, there's just so much on our plates. I mean, the unfortunate reality is that we all just have too much on our plates. But I think we need to own the role that we play as individuals in allowing ourselves to be overserved. And we all have the ability to curate our plates so that they become well-balanced meals. We really just have to empower ourselves to act on that ability. And I think that that's really what Dr. Podl and I were trying to accomplish today, just to give you some tools to empower you to make some different choices. And that's all we have. I don't know if we have time for questions, or if anyone has questions, or we need to move on to the next one. You tell me. Okay. Anyone have questions for us while we're here? You want this? Okay.
I was just wondering if there are reliable tests. I know you mentioned cortisol as a impacting factor. I've heard and read a little bit about cortisol, but I don't know, like how is that measured, or is it even accurate to measure that?
Excellent question and great point. Yeah, cortisol is foundationally important. Testing for cortisol, very unreliable, not very helpful, sadly. You know, whatever the hydroxycut thing was advertised on TV for a long time doesn't really seem to do anything. I mean, it's sad. It'd be great if we had, listen, I would love it if you had all these supplements that would work and other things too. But the fact of the matter, so much of your health and well-being is foundationally just based on what you do day to day, right? And so that's more than you cared to hear about. But the long story short is, you know, getting your cortisol tested, unless you really have a known endocrinologic defect, which is really not that common, it's really not important or valuable. There are a lot of practitioners out there who will do it, but I like roll my eyes, and the endocrinologists roll their eyes like, we wish that would be helpful, but it's not.
I'm going to get a workout today.
Thank you. This is so interesting. How important is the quality of that 7 to 8 hours sleep? So if you're sleeping 7 to 8 hours, but it's not restful sleep, how important does it matter?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you were probably monitored, if you could monitor people while they sleep, yeah, you'd probably see some variations and things. So yeah, sleep quality is important. You know, not just, okay, like watching the clock, I just got to post another 10 minutes and I can get out of bed. Yeah, it's again, hard to say. People, and that's really the tricky part. You know, it seems like sleep should be such an easy thing, and we've created a bigger problem. The amazing thing to me is when you look at the history of sleep, this is the shortest time people have slept in the history of mankind, humankind. And it's amazing. People used to go to bed when the sun went down. And you might have heard about a second sleep before. So people would sleep and then to get up in the middle of the night, chat, do other things, and then go back asleep and sleep that way for a long time. So, I mean, we used to, I mean, even pre like 1910 or so, you know, when the industrialization came along, people were probably sleeping closer to 10, 11 hours a night. And here we are at this. And then I remember when I did a presentation at Eton and talked about sleep one time, I had people, you know, and honestly, like, how many hours of sleep people got? Nobody got 7 hours of sleep or more. It was all less. Most people had 5, some were 6. And so it's a pervasive problem. I wish we had a better way to fix that. I mean, even people say, what can I take sleepy time tea? And those things, what about valerian root? And there are a lot of things out there, but I think at the end of the day, you know, some of these other things, you know, healthy nutrition, taking time, being with others, all those kinds of things that center us as people on the planet are probably still our best tools.
Okay,
We have
we'll
one.
quickly do these last 2 questions.
Okay.
Okay, I don't actually, is it on? Okay, I don't actually have a question. It's more of a comment. Having known Niki both before and post-stroke, I see a tremendous difference in the contentment and the happiness that you exude. And I want to thank you for your vulnerability and being brave and sharing that with this group. But one of the things that neither of you mentioned, but I'm going to mention, I think is a wonderful thing, what you are modeling for your family and your children and what is important in life. And I think that is phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you. I will say that when I had my stroke, my daughter was famously at an Ariana Grande concert with Kaylin, who was our nanny at the time. And it was right before spring break. And we ended up having to cancel our trip to Colorado to go. I'm a snowboarder. I was going to be snowboarding there. I did, when I could talk again, famously ask my mom if I could go to Colorado in a wheelchair. But I was denied and we did not go on that trip. But my daughter, when she found out that I had a stroke, I mean, she was 8 years old. She like really didn't know. And she came back home and cried to me after the Ariana Grande concert, where she had amazing seats and stayed in a hotel with Kaylin, that I ruined her life. Because we weren't going on our trip to Colorado. So, but I think now when we tell her that story, she's mortified that she said that. But it was pretty funny at 8 years old. We all done? Okay. Thank you.